Welcome! In this video we will make use of our color picker control on a form with the PowerBasic Windows compiler. At the end of the last video, this is where we left our HTML charting program. We have a facility to put in the title of the chart. We can pick the foreground and background colors of the title. We can pick the font of the title, and we can assign a value to the chart's width and the chart's height. What we're going to add today is a facility to add a chart background color, with the idea that we can do a gradient fill on the chart background color. So to do that, we need to go into our Forms Designer. We're going to add some more controls to our Forms Designer, but fairly basic ones. First of all, we'll add a title for our chart background color. And underneath this, we're going to place two read-only text boxes. These to be used to show the color for the start of the gradient and the color for the end of the gradient. Now we're going to remove the tab stop from these to stop the user tabbing into them. We're going to make it read-only. In addition to that, if you normally make one of these read-only, it changes the background colour to grey. But I want to leave the background colour as white to indicate that the default value would be white. So we're going to change the setting for the background colour from using the system colour to just use white. And looking at the size, our width is 100 and our height is 13, so I think we will go for a width of 25. Yeah, that's perfect. Right, we're going to need two of these. And we'll move this one over here. And when we place these on the screen, we'll be putting a color picker control to the right of each of them, and also in between I want the facility using a checkbox. We can let the user select whether the graph is going to allow a gradient or just a single color. Right, we'll bring that down a little bit. And I think we will move it up fractionally. And we will bring this back. To about here. Right, okay, having got that in place, what we're intending to do is when the form loads, we will have this text box which will contain a colour and the colour picker control both invisible to the user, and once they click on the gradient fill, they will become visible. So let's just save that and go back to our original form, and we'll go to where the form code is, and we'll see at the bottom of the code we have got in yes, we haven't actually named our text boxes, which is something we really need to do. So this one is color start, and we want the second one as color end. Right, okay, having done that, we can go back to our code, and there's a color start and color end done quite nicely. Okay, now first of all we will put the color picker controls in place. If we go down, create a bit of space to put them in. Now before we had a background color one, so we are just going to steal this piece of code all we need to do is paste that in, and we'll put a little comment in. Now our root control handle in this case is going to be the one we set up, which is text color start. The painting handle, the one we're going to actually paint, is the same object. Our control handle in this case is going to be a new variable, so we'll put that in a moment, and we are indeed setting the background color. Since we're adding two new color pickers, we'll need two new variables. So we will call this one color start, and we will call the other one color end. And since we're having two controls, we will duplicate this code for the gradient end, and we'll rename that as end because we're going to use the color end box. Right, okay, so we now have two new variables to create, one called color start and one called color end. So if we go up to our code where we set these variables up, constants rather, these are constants. Right, now having set those both up, we run our program now, just to check we've got everything as it should be. There are our two new text boxes with their color pickers in place. We'll pick the first color picker and we'll pick a color for the gradient start. And for our second one, we'll pick a darker color. And there we go. So with a minimum amount of code, we have actually put additional objects on screen with the visible color pickers. All we have to do now is to put the code into the event handler so that when you tick on the gradient fill checkbox, these two controls here, which will initially be invisible, will be shown. So if we go to our event handler, in here at the beginning of the event handler is where we want to initialize any controls on the screen. So we want these two new controls to be invisible on screen. So easy thing to do, we'll do a prefix command as usual. We want to use control hide. And two controls we wish to hide initially are these. Now if we try running our program now, they are indeed hidden. So what we need to do, we need to pick up the click on the gradient fill checkbox so that every time it's ticked they will appear and every time it's unticked they will disappear. So we go further down the event handler to where the main commands are. We want to put a new case statement in on the control which is the gradient control. And with all buttons, we need to test to make sure the button has actually been clicked. And that will do it nicely. So if the button's been clicked, it could either be checked or unchecked. So we need to pick up what is the value sitting in that checkbox at the moment. So we're picking up the check status using the dialog handle, and to save having to paste in this value again, you can make it quite generic and use that. CBCTL picks up the control that has been notified. So it's effectively what has been clicked upon. Now we want to send that value to a variable which we can then test. So we're going to create a new variable called longState, which we will declare up at the beginning of our function. And this is going to hold the value we get back from that check. So having picked up the value in the checkbox, we need to test it. And the value is either going to be 0 or 1. Zero for it has been unchecked, and 1 when it has been checked. So when the user actually ticks the box to turn off the gradient, we want to make the controls invisible. And when the box is checked, when the tick's been put in the box, we want to make the controls visible. And the command to do this is control hide. And we just have to put in the handles to the two controls we wish to actually change. That will effectively hide them, and we need to do exactly the same, but this time display them. And the command for that is normalize. So when a user comes in, clicks on the tick box, we test the state of the tick box. If the tick has been taken away, we hide the controls. If the tick has been put in, we'll display them. So we run our program now. The initial logic shows the boxes not being there. We click on the tick box and they appear. And since they're just being made visible and not visible, any setting you actually put in for that background colour will still be there when you tick it again. Which is perfect. So we've now gathered an extra bit of information for our charting control. We can now pick up a gradient fill for the background colour. There are a number of other things we're going to have to put on screen to actually gather more information before we can actually generate a chart. But to show you the direction we're going, what we're going to do now is we're going to put some logic behind the Build a Chart button to actually display our HTML chart inside a browser. So in our event handler, we have a piece of code in here already which picks up the Build a Chart button. Now, following the validation of the form, this is where we want to put our logic in. Now, I'm going to chop some of the existing code around here to give us what we actually want. We're still going to use the strURL variable to decide where in the temporary directory we're actually going to put this HTML file we're going to display. And we're still going to be using a build routine. We're going to call this one build chart. And I want to pass it two parameters. I want to tell it where the URL is, first of all. And because we want to pull information off the screen, we'll need to give it the handle to the dialog itself. Then the next thing we'll do is we're going to use the logic that saves the cascading style sheet. We may not be using the cascading style sheet in the chart, but we'll leave it there just for the moment. And following that, we'll want to put a new piece of code in whose job it is to actually show the web page. And we're going to borrow a piece of code we did in a previous video. Shell execute. What this will do is it will take the URL we've created, which is basically a file on the local machine, and it will attempt to execute it in Windows with whatever the associated program is, which will be whatever your favourite browser is. This will do our task quite nicely. And we can ignore all the code down here. We can tidy this up. I'm going to leave this piece of code here for the moment. I may have use for that later. So most of this code we've already got. The temporary directory one is a common function to work out what the Windows temporary directory is. Build a chart is new, we're going to have to do that. The save cascading style sheet to the temporary directory already exists. So all we need to do now is to build our chart. Now, we need to pass the two parameters to this program. First of all, the handle to the dialog and the file to which we'll be writing. We're going to need some local variables. One to contain all the HTML, and there will be a number of variables to pick up the data that's actually on our main screen. Now, I've created these earlier. This won't be all the variables I need, these are just some of the variables. We're going to do a minimalistic approach here. We're going to pick up the height of the chart, the width, the title font, the title font size. We're going to work out our X and our Y coordinates of where the title is going to appear on the chart. Now, we're going to use the SVG command in HTML. But first of all, we have to get the values. Now, to save a little time, we're going to hard code these today. In the next video, we're going to pull these off the screen. So what we've done here is we're setting a default height of the chart at 200, width at 500. We're going to set a default title. We're going to set the font. We're going to set the font size. And we're going to get the X and Y coordinates of where you want the font on screen. Now, the next thing to do is we're going to have to start building up our HTML. Right, that's the headers, mostly. Now we get to the bit to do with the chart. We're using the $DQ command to put in a double quote. It makes our code easier to write and much more readable, because many of the parameters within HTML need double quotes or single quotes as being the delimiter. But our $DQ is very useful, constant within PowerBasic for this purpose. First thing we want to do is to set the height of the graph. And then our width. Right, having set the height and the width, we can then start to set the size of the font we're actually going to be using. And to save a little time, I'll just paste in the rest as a winner. So what we're actually doing here is we're setting up to use the vector graphics command to set the height from our value in height, and in the next video we will actually derive that from what's your user's keyed on screen. We'll then set the width, the title font size, the actual font we're going to be using, the X and Y coordinates on the screen, and then finally the actual text to show on the screen. Now this is always on the assumption that the user is actually using a browser which will support the svg command, and not all browsers actually can. Modern ones can, but the older ones can't. So what we will also do is we will put a catch down at the bottom here for those who cannot support this command. Displaying a message to the user that it doesn't support inline SVG, and then closing off the SVG command at the end. And then to finish off the HTML, we only have to add the closing of the body and the HTML tags. Now, assuming we've typed all this correctly, we can then send the information we've just built up in this variable out to our file. And just to make sure there's no file lying around, we will attempt to kill off any existing file. And we're using a try construct in this case, just in case the file doesn't exist. We don't want to error in the program. So we will attempt to kill the file. If we do not manage to kill the file, in other words, if we can't find it, then we'll just continue with the program. And then finally, we're going to make use of one of our commands we prepared earlier. This common function in one of our libraries will append to the file. Now, as we've just wiped a file, it will create the file. And we'll return true. Now, assuming we've keyed all this correctly and we haven't made any errors, which we obviously have. Oh, have we not declared the HTML? I thought we had. Oh, we misspelt the variable name. Yes, as this is expecting not a string, we'll put it in its original construct. This particular Windows API call is expecting not a variable of that particular type, but if we add two variables together, it should compile quite cleanly. Which it does. Right, okay, if we actually run our program now, there we have our details on screen, so we can put our details in here just for some test purposes, and appearing on screen is our file with our title in large font. Now the beauty of using this particular approach is that if we use the zoom command, the text will get bigger, but it will not get pixelated, which is ideal for our chart. So that's all we're going to do today. What we're going to do in the next video is we're going to start picking up the values from the screen, i.e. the title, the chart width, the chart height, and our background colours, and actually use them in generating the chart rather than hard coding them. But that's it for today. Thank you for watching.